Today, we're going to talk about the media and Hillary Clinton. Specifically, we're going to show how the U.S. political press propagated a distorted view of Clinton to the public through negatively biased media coverage and misleading or false narratives. This is the third part of a four-part series of videos available at the link below. Part 3. The media narrative on Hillary Clinton was set well before election 2016. The fact that Clinton has a tough time with the media was evident back in 2008. Dana Milbank of The Washington Post made some observations on this in December 2007. He said that whether or not Clinton lost Iowa, quote, "the press will savage her no matter what," end quote. He pointed out that the press has had a poisonous relationship with Clinton. In May 2008, journalist Joan Walsh of Salon.com was more direct in describing what many people in the media felt about Clinton.
Hate Hillary Clinton, most of them. Hate is not too strong a word. And so there was such a double standard.
What's striking is that influential figures in the media predicted tough coverage for Clinton if she decided to run again in 2016. Remember, this was a long time before Clinton even made a decision to run for president again. Here's Chuck Todd of NBC News on The Charlie Rose Show in June 2014.
Washington media gets wrong. She has there is a Clinton fatigue problem, but it's in the press corps. I think there is much less Clinton fatigue in the Democratic Party than there is in the press corps, which, by the way, is going to be a separate challenge for her. Right? The press that's going to cover her is going to cover her with less enthusiasm or more skepticism than the way Democratic activists are going to embrace her and be enthusiastic about it.
Now listen to Mark Halperin of Time magazine discussing Clinton's challenges with the media on MSNBC's Morning Joe. There are two separate clips here, both from July 2014.
But she has a lot of positive attributes that are currently just being overwhelmed by all this negative coverage, and it's going to keep going. The momentum, the press loves to cover her hard. The momentum is all against her right now. And
why is that, Mark?
About the press?
Yeah.
The Clintons have tried to figure that out for several decades. I don't know, but they're held to a different standard. Look, I don't ever like to overstate the media's role, but media has a pretty big role in the presidential process. I think she's talking about what is the most important issue, determining whether she'll be president right now. She'll raise the money. She'll have policy positions. She needs to find a way, we talked about this the other day, to change the narrative about how she's being covered. Right now, she's destined to get horrible coverage if she runs for president.
Let's fast forward to March 2015. Clinton had not yet announced that she was running for president, but there was increasing speculation that she would. As predicted earlier by influential people in the media, the tough and negative media coverage began early. In the New York Times, Patrick Healy wrote that, quote, "Clinton's toughest foe appears to be the news media," end quote. The media's focus, the Clinton email story. In the article, Healy wondered if a, quote, "news media-driven primary will inflict the kind of damage to Mrs. Clinton that could affect her standing among independents, swing voters, and undecided Democrats," end quote. As we'll see later in this video, his words would turn out to be prophetic. What he didn't say was how the media coverage on Clinton was not quite accurate and was starting to create a misleading picture of Clinton. In fact, the media's coverage of the Clinton email story prompted other journalists to start speaking out, lamenting what they considered weak journalism and a desire to hype minor stories about Clinton's mistakes into a major scandal. In March 2015, Paul Waldman wrote an article in The Week. He said, quote, the media already bungled Hillary's email gate, end quote. He pointed out that the mainstream media has a history of huge mistakes when it came to covering the Clintons. Specifically, quote, treating every Republican charge, no matter how ludicrous, as though it was worthy of a full-scale investigation, end quote. That same month, Kurt Eichenwald dissected the email story in Newsweek. He wrote that a careful scrutiny of the claims about Clinton's email practices did not indicate any evidence of scandal. Instead, he said, quote, the real scandal is about journalism and the weak standards employed to manufacture headlines, end quote. Over a year later, in May 2016, Eichenwald, after having examined all the latest evidence, would conclude that, quote, the scandal over Clinton's emails still isn't a scandal, end quote. Ryan Cooper went a bit further in the week. His view was that the mainstream media hates Hillary Clinton and that they are extremely thirsty for another Clinton scandal. Cooper also highlighted a statement from NBC's Chuck Todd that the Clintons, quote, don't get the benefit of the doubt from reporters, end quote. The fact that many people in the media disliked Hillary Clinton was also obvious to longtime Republicans. Here's a short clip from ABC's The View in March 2015, where Nicole Wallace makes this observation. Recall that Wallace was the communications director for former President George W. Bush and a senior advisor to Senator John McCain when he ran for president in 2008.
He was Secretary of State.
She was emailing the president, too. Let me say, you have three groups watching what she did yesterday. Her base of support, the Democratic Party, she has about 70-80% approval rating. They're, oh, Hillary, I don't like carrying lots of stuff either. No problem, right. Okay? So they're fine. The media, they hate her the most, okay? More than my party. They hate her the most. And even the most respected journalists said, you know, oh, the Clintonian penchant for secrecy is back. They have PTSD from the last Clinton presidency. They are done with her.
After Clinton formally announced that she was running for president, negative media coverage intensified. For example, here is Dylan Byers writing in Politico in May 2015. Byers observed that, quote, first, the national media have never been more primed to take down Hillary Clinton and, by the same token, elevate a Republican candidate. Even before she announced her presidential bid, the New York Times alone had published more than 40 articles related to her private email account, spurring other stories across the national print, digital, and television media. That same month, journalist Michelle Goldberg mentioned the media coverage of Clinton in MSNBC.
There is this kind of long-standing journalistic vendetta against the Clintons that kind of allows people to exaggerate and follow these sort of right-wing conspiracy theories down all sorts of rabbit holes and blind alleys, to mix metaphors.
The media's dislike for Hillary Clinton was also the focus of an article by Matthew Iglesias in Vox. He pointed out that when it came to the media's coverage of Clinton, quote, good news is never just good news, end quote. He wrote that the media never fails to remind readers about their own negative narratives of Clinton, even when they publish positive news about her. As the media's unfair coverage of Clinton intensified, journalist Jonathan Allen wrote a trenchant article in Vox in July 2015. The article was titled, quote, Confessions of a Clinton Reporter, the Media's 5 Unspoken Rules for Covering Hillary, end quote. What were those rules? Well, let's review them. 1. Everything, no matter how ludicrous sounding, is worthy of a full investigation by federal agencies, Congress, the vast right-wing conspiracy, and mainstream media outlets. 2. Every allegation, no matter how ludicrous, is believable until it can be proven completely and utterly false. And even then, it keeps a life of its own in the conservative media world. 3. The media assumes that Clinton is acting in bad faith until there's hard evidence otherwise. 4. Everything is newsworthy because the Clintons are the equivalent of America's royal family. And 5. Everything she does is fake and calculated for maximum political benefit. And what was Allen's conclusion? That the media has the power to, quote, weigh down and even destroy a candidate, end quote. That there are double standards in how the media covers Clinton, and that their coverage, quote, distorts the public's perception of Hillary Clinton, end quote. The systematic distortion of the public's perception of Clinton then took a turn for the worse. In late July 2015, the New York Times published yet another story on Clinton's emails that reverberated quickly through the entire media landscape. It suggested that Hillary Clinton was the target of a criminal investigation. As with many prior and subsequent news reports, the story was far from the truth. This prompted an extended comment from MSNBC's Rachel Maddow. Maddow said, quote, the story goes from being about how Hillary Clinton is the subject of a criminal inquiry by the Justice Department to Hillary Clinton is not the subject of any criminal inquiry to there is no criminal inquiry, end quote. She went on to say, quote, the Times changes the headline, they change the lead, they publish not one but two corrections. Then, over the weekend, the New York Times public editor, who is sort of the reader's advocate at the paper, weighed in. Quote, a Clinton story fraught with inaccuracies, end quote. Later in her comment, Maddow added, quote, it is also a reminder of the utterly bizarre relationship that the national media has with Hillary Clinton specifically. Basically, in the national media, everything Hillary Clinton does is a scandal. Remember when she was super guilty in Whitewater? Hillary Clinton is covered as if she's a convicted felon. She has to prove her innocence every time she is accused of something. Even then, she's still guilty. She just got away with it, end quote. By now, many other journalists had started to weigh in on the media coverage of Clinton. James Fallows at The Atlantic tweeted that the New York Times, quote, Clinton vendetta is a serious lapse, end quote. Michael Cohen, who writes for the Boston Globe, tweeted that the New York Times coverage of Hillary Clinton was a, quote, biased train wreck, end quote. Subsequently, Ryan Cooper wrote in The Week that, quote, the media needs to get over its blind hatred of Hillary Clinton, end quote. And David Weigel of The Washington Post remarked that, quote, the media's willingness to believe the worst about Clinton, end quote, continued to be the toughest problem for her campaign. Needless to say, it wasn't just people in the media who chimed in. Jay Rosen is a respected professor of journalism at NYU and a longtime media observer and critic. He said that after the most recent stories about Clinton, he had to admit that the New York Times had a problem covering Clinton. Despite all that evidence, some people might still believe that the media's negativity towards Hillary Clinton is just a myth manufactured by liberal journalists. But, as we saw earlier, that is not true. Here's another person who briefly talked about the media's attitude towards Clinton, Bill O'Reilly of Fox News.
There are stuff that she did with this email, and the press hasn't turned against Hillary Clinton per se, but they don't like her, generally speaking. The American press, which is very unusual for a liberal woman, they don't like her. And I don't know if that's fair to Hillary Clinton. I really don't.
It's clear that numerous people in the media, regardless of ideology or partisan affiliation, agree that the American political press does not like Hillary Clinton and is prone to portraying her negatively and unfairly. In the final part of this series, we'll look at how this has impacted Clinton's public image.